all, it's me again, but this time with a review of a watch instead of the usual shoes, the Coros Nomad. Usual disclaimer, I bought this watch myself from a local shop in Malta and I got it for 15% off. Instead of 380, I paid 330 euro, and all opinions in this video are my own. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible, most likely it will still touch the 15 minutes. However, if I do miss something, please do not hesitate to comment and I'll get back to you. Let's start with the main reason why I bought this watch. At the start of January, I managed to get hold of a Vertix 2S. A follower who had the Vertix 2S for sale gave it to me so I could sell it for him. However, until I sold it, I had the chance to wear it. I gave the Suunto Vertical to a friend of mine to try it out, and I was using the Vertix for a couple of runs solely. And to be honest, the watch was first of all quite large. Was quite bulky, and I didn't enjoy handling it, especially when I was navigating during a run. However, I feel that it would be very unfair to review a Coros watch on using it for a couple of days, especially the new models became available and they had an action button and improved software. So I decided to buy one of the new models so I could review it as well. And between the Apex 4 and the Nomad, I chose the cheapest of the options because essentially they are similar except to the speaker and maybe glass and body. Let's start with the hardware. To be honest, I believe this watch is a very good looking watch. It does remind me of the times I used to use the Casio G-Shock watches, and it does feel it has the same kind of looks, the same body type of a Casio G-Shock or the Garmin Instinct models as well. I do think that, to be honest, it's kind of a copy of the Garmin Instinct models. However, I do feel that the Garmin, they do look better. One thing about the styling that I do not like is the huge Coros logo on the side of the main watch face, something which I do believe it could have been a little bit more subtle rather than look, it's a Coros watch. However, irrespective of the body is made of plastic, etc., it does feel rugged and I think it could handle a beating. The watch has an MIP screen covered with non-sapphire glass, and to be honest, I think for an MIP screen it's quite crisp. The darker blacks are much darker and they have much more legible fonts. They're even sharper as well, at least when I compare it to the Enduro 2 I used to own. MIP screen feels dull and boring, especially when interacting with widgets. It does offer crystal clear views in direct sunlight, something I believe no AMOLED screen can match. When running under trees or in shade, then the AMOLED comes out on top again. I do believe that there could be some hardware improvements. First of all is an addition of a flashlight, an actual one, similar to the Garmin Instinct models, and increasing the size of the screen from 1.3 inches to 1.5. For 380 euro, I feel that the watch is quite solid and it can withstand a beating. In these new models, as I said earlier, the action button was extra and they introduced it on both the Nomad and the Apex 4. It does nothing when using the watch day to day, however, during inactivity it serves a very good purpose. If you remember, when I was speaking about the Vertix 2S, I said that I had issues during navigation. I was used to the Suunto race, and I do believe that the Vertix confused my brain cells when I was clicking the crown, etc., and nothing worked as I believed it would, and I ended up the navigation, etc. With the Nomad, the relationship, it did improve, because once you press the action button, you can access the navigation/map screen and then use the crown immediately to zoom in and out. I still do prefer the way Suunto implements the use of the crown. it's a third button, and when you are on the map, it automatically, you cannot click it unless you're zooming in and out. When you click it, it moves from one screen to another. In this newer models, as I said, is an improvement. Maybe my muscle memory needs to relearn how to use it. However, I still think that the Suunto is better implemented, especially maybe Coros could consider that kind of implementation for the older Coros models before the Nomad and the Apex 4. The crown on Coros watches is the main button, which means it's the only one you press to select options and the one you turn to scroll through the screen and pages, both in activities and even when you're using the watch on a daily basis. It is a pretty sensitive button, but I had no issues with touching it or pressing it during runs. The only time I experienced some issues when I was doing weight training and the glove was turning the crown on its own. The other issues were mainly related to my muscle memory, as I said, not wanting to unlearn how the crown worked on my previous watch rather than with the Coros watch itself. Software-wise, I think it still feels a bit outdated. I mentioned this when I was reviewing the Coros Space Pro, and I'll say it again because the software looks identical. They might need to revamp a bit their UI to look more modern and stylish, especially when it's visible on the AMOLED watches. The UI, on the other hand, is very fluid. I had no issues with slowdowns when navigating through widgets, maps, and activities. The watch never froze, and it worked well out of the box. Some areas that I believe could need some improvement, such as the end screen of an activity. On Suunto, when you press the main button, it moves forward until you exit to the main watch face. On Coros, on the other hand, once you arrive to the last page, instead of moving forward again, you have to go back through all the menus until you reach the watch face again. Another drawback is the inability to adjust the backlight brightness. It's a single setting and you cannot configure the backlight per activity. Let's say, for example, you want the backlight on gesture mode for activity 1 and not 2. It's only available in the global settings, so it's either on or off unless you keep it all the time on with night mode. Another issue is the font size. I do believe that some screens and menus could benefit from slightly larger fonts. There is space for it, or at least provide an option to customize the font size. Continuing with the negatives, during an activity, until LepRes isn't available from third-party software, such as intervals.icu, the platform from which I transfer my workouts, which, to be honest, is a bit disappointing, especially when I'm doing hill sessions. Sometimes I don't know which hill I'm going to choose, to be honest, so usually I create an interval until LepRes, and then when I decide on the hill, I click the left button. A workaround that I did on the Coros, I usually include a 20-kilometer stretch, so once I find the hill, I press the back button so it goes for the next interval. The left screen, I also think that it needs improvement because it displays information on a black background, even though in the global settings I chose to display it on a white background, which makes it almost impossible to read, especially when the backlight is not on. Additionally, I would like to see which lap I am on, not just the pace, etc. I want to see that it's on kilometer 1 or kilometer 20. Lastly, something similar to Climb Pro, it would be appreciated, especially for those who run trail running and ultra running. Now I'm going to move to the positives. One software feature that I really like is the ability to select a gear at the end of the session from the watch, something that even Garmin implemented in one of their latest softwares for particular watches. It does not have a widget like Garmin to see how many kilometers you have on each shoe, but the fact that at least you can choose the shoe is already enough for me. Another reason to interact less with the mobile phone after the activity, because I could choose everything from the watch. Maps are excellent, detailed with street names, something that Suunto desperately needs to copy. You cannot create a route on the watch like Garmin does, so it's not vector maps, but once you upload your route, it's very easy to follow and to see exactly where you are. As I mentioned earlier, the UI is fluid and you can navigate very easily through the menus. Settings are easy to find and it's not overly complicated or fragmented, unlike the Amazfit T-Rex 3 Pro. Of course, if you come from another brand, you might need to relearn some things, but overall I do believe it's straightforward. The watch offers offline music, MP3s only unfortunately, and you can transfer these only via wired connection from your laptop. Spotify or other streaming services, of course, would be welcome, but at least you can have some music on the watch compared to the Suunto Vertical 2, which doesn't support that. Card payments, etc. are not possible on Coros. With Coros, you can back up the watch settings and restore them on a new watch, even if you bought a different model than your previous watch, which saves some time, especially for those who dislike changing devices. Now, I'm going to speak slightly about the performance. Let's start with battery life. Coros claims 34 hours with dual frequency GPS. To be honest, I think they are not far from that claim. Of course, you might get slightly more if you connect it to an external heart rate or you choose all systems GPS instead, which bumps the battery life to 50 hours. Irrespective of which setting you choose, I do believe that it's good for most people, unless you're doing multi-stage races. HR accuracy was consistent, good in almost all runs. Sometimes I do believe it outperformed my Suunto Smart HR chest strap. I'm going to show some charts for your reference, but I was honestly pleased with the results. Usually I do use an arm strap, so I tested the optical heart rate just for the sake of the review. The GPS performed very well during runs, trail runs and road runs. It sometimes tends to smooth corners, especially when there are many switchbacks, but I can say it's bad. Perhaps it's not as accurate as my Vertical 2, but I don't think it will be a deciding factor if I had to choose this one over some other watches. One area which I think performed poorly was open water swimming. The first swim was smoothed, so the track was smoothed significantly, and the second swim, the Nomad took some shortcuts. For example, at the end of the swim, I crossed the starting path and the Nomad did not register it. For reference, both watches were on my same wrist. Of course, for more detailed reviews of performance, etc., you can always watch reviews from DC Rainmaker, Chase the Summit or Desfit. The last topic I want to discuss is the application. I connected it to an Android phone and I experienced no issue with losing connections or data not syncing. Anyone can try the app by simply downloading it, create a free account and import some activities from other sources and you can check it out. It performs the basic functions as expected. Data is abandoned and displayed in card style layout on a single page. You click on that card and it gives you more detail. The app also offers live tracking similar to the Garmin one when you pair it with the watch, and of course they need to be connected throughout the run. It sends an email to your safety contacts and then they could follow you live during that activity. Is the watch worth buying? If you want a budget sport watch that won't break the bank and ticks most of the boxes, then I would say yes, definitely. It does what it has to do very well. However, you should understand that you might need to sacrifice some features or accept some shortcomings. They're not big, but they are there. Some of them might be addressed in future software updates. Some of them, they are hardware related, and of course, those, unless a new watch comes out, you will not be able to sort them out. Will I swap my Suunto Vertical 2 with the Nomad? Personally, most likely I won't. And the main reason is taste. It's not the performance of the watch. Suunto, I think, is a much simpler watch. Software-wise, it's cleaner, it feels more modern. Okay, it has a very clean UI on the watch. And to be honest, I have grown to appreciate that lack of data and its minimalist software. I tend to interact much less with my Suunto than compared to how much I used to interact with my Garmin, and as a result it reduced my anxiety about my performance, sleep performance, etc. by a lot. And that is, I believe, the main reason why I won't swap. Again, it's not because the Nomad is an inferior watch. Of course, the looks, it's made of plastic, but again, you need to consider there are two different watches between this one and the Vertical 2, and even the price point is different as well. This is half price compared to the Vertical 2. However, as well, none of the watches are perfect, so you can get this one, a Garmin, a Vertical, whatever you're gonna get, most likely there's gonna be areas for improvement. Suunto does have plenty, I think more than Coros, to be honest, especially from a data perspective and software features. However, again, some things might hopefully arrive in future updates. That was it for today. I hope I covered most areas, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to comment below or send me a message on any of the socials which are listed in the description of this video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.